Hi there, and welcome to Master of Horror. These are the scariest stories I've ever come across and are handpicked by me. Some stories are from my own experiences, and again, I have lived in a haunted house for longer than 8 years. I also have rain in my background specifically to help you relax if needed. These are 3 true Wendigo and paranormal stories in the rain, number 22. Thank you for listening, and please like and subscribe. It really helps my channel. Okay, now let's begin. True paranormal story number 1, The Walking Cheetah. Now, I heard this story about 5 years ago, but after finding out this was 100% true, I decided to add this true story. It really scared me. Story told by Jim Walker. Hi, I'm a mechanic, and in the 1960s, I was about 19 years old, and I had gotten done working late on some cars that I was working on at the shop. It was about 9 o'clock p.m. or so. I remember saying goodbye to the owner of the shop and getting into my car. I don't know if many people know about the Bridgewater Triangle, but it's known to be a very paranormal hotspot. I don't live in it, but I did have to drive through there every day to and from work on one of the main highways. One night, I remember that I was truly tired and I just wanted to get home. I was driving down the highway. It's surrounded by woods on both sides of it. It took me about 20 minutes to get home from work. At this time, I was unfortunately the only one on the road. About 10 minutes into my drive, I noticed that the light above my head started flickering. I didn't pay much attention to it. Then my car started shaking and it completely stalled out. I was surprised because I always kept up with my car and made sure it was in top-notch condition. I pulled over to the side of the road and I got out with my flashlight in my hand and walked over to the hood of the car and I opened it. I couldn't find anything wrong with it. There was nothing wrong with the engine. Being a mechanic, I felt like I could fix any problem. But at that moment, I felt very vulnerable, being alone in the dark at night on the side of the road. I heard a noise to the left side of me in the woods and flashed my light towards the noise. I couldn't see anything. I started to get really scared at that point. I got in my car and tried to start it again, but it still did not start. So I got out once more and I hurried back out of my car and flashed my light into the engine, trying to see why it didn't want to start. Just then, something knocked me down to the ground. I fell straight down flat on my back. My flashlight rolled away. I felt something on top of me putting pressure on my chest. I then started to feel punches on my face and scratches. Whatever was on me began cursing. I put my hands up against it to push it off, but I felt nothing but fur. There was an actual creature on me. It had a very strong musky smell. I was screaming for dear life, and I reached over with one of my arms, trying to push it off with my other arm. I then grabbed the flashlight and started hitting this creature that was on me. As I was hitting this creature, I saw with the help of the flashlight something that terrifies me to this day. Even thinking about it scares me to the core. It had the body of a cheetah, yet the face of a man with fur. The creature had red glowing eyes. It had claws that were covered in blood, my blood. I hit the creature again harder with the end of the flashlight, but it didn't faze the creature. This creature kept punching me like a human would. I couldn't comprehend what was going on at all. But just then, at that moment, when I felt like I was going to die, I saw headlights coming down from the highway. The headlights shined directly on me and the cheetah that was on top of me. The creature then stopped assaulting me and looked at the headlights that were coming down the road and ran directly back into the woods where it came from. I stayed on the ground, bloody and traumatized, trying to catch my breath. I turned to the right and I stared at the car that was now parked right in front of me. A man came out of the car and walked up to me. He asked me if I was okay, and I asked him, did he see what it was that was on me? The man answered back and said, yes, I saw what was on you. It looked like a giant cat, but when it ran into the woods, it ran on its hind legs like a human would. I was petrified when he said that, because I knew what attacked me was not a human. I told the man that this thing was cursing and talking. The man gave me a ride to the police station and I filed a police report that exact night. They searched the area but nothing was found. I am now 68 years old. I will never second guess my story. It really did happen to me. Scary, true, paranormal story number 2. The Imaginary Kid. When I was about 11 years old, my dad was in the military, so we moved around a lot. We would move from place to place. I hardly ever had the chance to make friends. We moved into a nice neighborhood. I would ride my bike around the block looking for something to do or just to pass the time. One day, I was riding my bike and there was this kid standing on the sidewalk. Something drew me to him. He looked like a nice kid. I pulled up to him and smiled, and he introduced himself. He said his name was Jack, and we made friends pretty quick. He pointed to the house directly behind him and told me that's where he lived. It was a 2-story old house and it looked pretty big, but it had a scary look to it. It kind of looked like a Victorian house. One of the windows was boarded up. My house was in a cul-de-sac area down the road from the kid's house. I was starting to go to this kid's house every day, and he would never let me in his house. We would play outside every day, and after about a week, I noticed that he would never bring toys outside. We would just play with my toys. We would always act like cops and robbers or cowboys and Indians. There were so many times I brought my toys over and he'd be excited about it, but he never really picked them up. I decided to just not really think about it because we were always having so much fun. One day I was extremely thirsty and I asked him if he can get me a glass of water or something to drink, but he said he can't go inside his house because his parents didn't want him coming in at that time. I got really upset and asked him, can I ask his parents if I can get some water, because I was extremely thirsty. We had been playing for a couple of hours, but again, he didn't let me ask his parents. He said, no, I can't, I just can't. We started to argue, so I got extremely upset. I got on my bike and I just took off. I left him there all alone. I was really upset because all I wanted was something to drink, like some water. I remember just riding my bike back home. I didn't play with him for a couple of weeks, but a day came that I got really bored, and I got on my bike and I went down the street and I saw him outside in front of his house. He started smiling and he waved at me to come towards him, so I got close to him and I parked my bike and I apologized to him. I said, I'm really sorry for leaving you like that and getting very upset at you. He told me that it was okay, that he found something that he's been wanting to show me. I was pretty surprised, so I followed him to his backyard. There on the ground, buried halfway, was an old-looking axe. He pointed to it and said, look what I found, it's really cool. I agreed. He then told me to dig it up, so I pulled it out of the ground. Then I followed him to a log that was nearby on the ground. He said for me to hit the log with the axe, but I told him to do it. I felt weird, like something was up. He said, "No, you do it." I told him to hit the log. I said, "Why me? Why can't you do it?" He said, "I just can't grab the axe." So after a while, he convinced me to do it, and it sounded like he was getting upset anyways. So I said, "Fine," and I went ahead and raised the axe in the air, and I counted to 3, 2, 1, and I hit the log that was on the ground as hard as I could. But just then, a piece of wood from the log went in the air and directly into my eye, my right eye. I screamed and dropped the axe and ran to my bike. I got on my bike and I started riding away from his house. He started laughing really loud. I finally knew that it was a setup. He was getting me back for arguing with him. The scariest thing was, as I was riding my bike all the way home, I could hear him laughing right behind me, just inches away from my ear. I turned back, but he wasn't there, but I could still hear him laughing. When I went into the front door of my house, blood was pouring down my right eye, and my mother freaked out. She then rushed me to the hospital. After 3 surgeries, I am still blind from my right eye. I began to realize as the days went by that it all added up. That kid was a ghost. I finally realized I was playing all that time with the ghost. Now that I look back on it, he wore the same clothes every day, and he never wanted to grab anything by hand. I never saw his parents, and there was never any cars outside his house. I was playing with a dead kid. Scary, true, paranormal story number 3. The entity under the car. Me and my family took a trip to visit relatives in Mexico. When we were leaving, we bought some things from a vendor on the side of the road. It was a cowboy hat and some candies. We got back on the road, and after about an hour or so, our car started shaking. My dad pulled over and checked the engine, but the engine was fine. So we continued driving again. Then we got a flat tire. So we had to pull over and fix it. We started driving again. Then the engine started smoking. So my dad had no choice but to pull over at a gas station. We went into the gas station and got some oil and water for the car. And on the way out, there was this old man sitting down outside the gas station. He told my dad that the reason why he was having these problems is because there is a demon under your car, and it's looking right at us. Did you buy anything recently? My dad told the old man that we got a hat from the side of the road. The old man said that the entity was connected to that hat. We threw away the hat, and as soon as we got back into the car, it drove normal all the way back home. Please be careful of what you buy and who you buy it from. Thank you for listening to Master of Horror. These were 3 scary, true paranormal stories in the rain, number 22. If you like what you've heard, please like and subscribe. And also, check out the other scary paranormal stories on my channel. Good night, my friends. And don't forget to leave the nightlight on. Hi there, and welcome to Master of Horror. These are 3 true Wendigo and paranormal stories in the rain, number 23. As you should know, I have chosen only the most scariest true paranormal stories that I've ever come across. Some of these stories are of my own experiences. Please like and subscribe. It really helps the channel. Now, my friends, let's begin. Scary, true Paranormal story number 1, the haunted apartment. In 1990, when we temporarily lived in West Virginia with my grandpa, many unexplainable things occurred. At night, the sound of dishes being thrown across the kitchen would wake us up, only to find the kitchen in perfect condition, and all the dishes were never moved. This happened for many nights. Most of us would feel as if something was constantly watching us. I was only about 7 years old. Yet I do remember as if it was yesterday. My grandpa would hear my mother call him from the kitchen area, but when my grandpa would walk over to the kitchen, it was empty. We would hear doors being slammed open and closed, and noises like keys being placed down on a table. My mother would see something black in the hallway, and it would then vanish. We would have nightmares constantly. It came to the point to where we decided to move back to Texas. My grandpa decided to stay in the apartment for another week. We eventually left. My grandpa stayed and invited one of his friends to stay with him. It was a working buddy of his. He claims that the same night that he was alone at the apartment with his buddy, they were drinking, sitting on the floor, having a great time. He was making fun of the hauntings that were occurring in the apartment, and they were just drinking. Just then, something picked him up and threw him against the wall. He bounced off and fell to the ground. His friend ran out of the apartment, and my grandfather followed right behind him. That same night, my grandpa decided to leave Virginia and drive back to Texas. He said while he was driving back to Texas, around 2 a.m, something was following him in the sky. It looked like a big black bird with red glowing eyes. It was swirling around the car in circles. The creature then swooped down and ran directly into his windshield. He said it had a man-like face. My grandpa slammed on the brakes, and the creature then pulled its head right back out of the windshield and flew off into the darkness. He pulled over at a gas station and had to have his windshield taped up. He was able to make it back home, and we all came out of the house when he pulled in the driveway. There was a huge dent on the hood of the car, and there was a hole in the middle of the windshield. This happened in 1991, and even though I was only 7 years old, I remember everything. Just to let people know the paranormal is real, whether you believe it or not. Scary, true, paranormal story number 2, Ghost Girl Folding a Blanket. When I was about 6 years old, we lived in a trailer in Rosenberg, Texas, and my mother would watch over me and my little sister while my dad went to work. One morning, my mom was making eggs in the kitchen while me and my sister were in my mom's room. My sister was asleep on my mom's bed while I was coloring in a coloring book. I was facing the wall standing up, and my sister was on the bed right behind me. I just remember feeling as if something was behind me, and I heard a small noise. So I turned around, and I was shocked to the core and caught by surprise. There was a blue-looking girl around 12 or so staring right at me. She was slowly folding a blanket, looking right into my eyes. She had black, long hair, and it looked wet. Also, it looked as if she was wearing a nightgown. This ghost-looking girl was inches away from my little sister who was asleep on the bed. I smiled and I said hi to her out of fear and waved at her. I slowly turned back around towards my coloring book, and deep inside I was petrified. I started coloring again, yet my mind was set on running out of that room. I was so afraid of this girl catching me while I was trying to run away. Yet, I counted down from 5. As soon as I got to 1, I took off out of the room screaming. My mother was in the kitchen and she turned towards me, wondering what happened. I explained everything to my mother. At first, she didn't believe me, but she eventually decided to go look in the room. She went into the room where I saw the girl, and nothing was there. Just my little sister sleeping on the bed. My mother told me to stay out of the room. After about 10 minutes, I then slowly walked up to the doorway and peeked into the room, and nothing was there. I then walked in and looked around the room, and to my shock and surprise, there was a wet spot right where the girl was standing. I looked towards my little sister, and there was a blanket on top of her. It was the same blanket that the ghost girl was folding. Scary, true, paranormal story number 3, the goat girl. While I was driving down the highway one night, headed home from working late at my job, I came across a young woman standing on the side of the road. I pulled up to her and asked her if she needed a ride, and she then nodded her head up and down and smiled at me. I opened my truck door and she hopped in. As we began driving down the road, I asked her where she was headed, and she told me to just go to the nearest town, which was about 20 minutes away. This girl looked young, maybe around 18 years old, and she did not talk the whole time. I decided to play some music, so I put my tape in the cassette player. After about 3 minutes of listening to music, I reached over to turn off the cassette player, but I accidentally hit the eject button, and the cassette tape fell onto the ground of the truck. She looked down at the cassette on the ground, and so did I, but I was driving at the same time. So, as I held on to the wheel with one hand, my other hand reached down to the ground to pick up the cassette. I was looking at the road, and every once in a while I had to look back down to the floor to grab the tape. The cassette tape was right next to her feet. As I looked at her feet, I was shocked to the core. What I saw to this day has petrified me. What I'm about to tell you is something that only the brave can handle. This girl had goat legs and goat feet. Her legs had fur and her feet were hooves. I was in shock and my eyes opened wide and I could feel my face go numb. I quickly looked at her and she was staring right at me. She knew that I saw her legs. I sat back up really quickly, and through the corner of my eye, I could see she was still staring at me. I couldn't stop shaking. She then started laughing. I can hear her laughing and giggling, yet through the corner of my eye, her mouth wasn't even moving. I slammed on the brakes and reached over quickly, grabbed the handle to the truck, and I opened the truck door. I lifted up my leg and I kicked her out. She flew out of the truck. I then slammed on the gas and took off. I was driving the truck well over 100 miles an hour down the highway. I looked over to my left out of the window and her face was looking right at me. She was flying and gliding right next to my truck window. How was this even possible, I thought. She was cursing and yelling. I could hear her screaming through the window. I drove even faster, and I don't know how fast I was going, but it must have been fast because she vanished. I made it to the nearest town. I got off and had to get my composure together. I was traumatized, and to this very day, I still am. Thank you for listening to Master of Horror. These are 3 scary, true paranormal stories in the rain, number 23. If you like what you've heard, please like and subscribe so you can get more great true paranormal stories with rain sounds. Well, my friends, good night, and don't forget to leave the nightlight on. Hi there, and welcome to Master of Horror, where I post the most scariest paranormal stories I've ever come across. Thank you for listening, and please like and subscribe. These are 3 scary, paranormal, and Wendigo stories in the rain, number 24. Okay, my friends, let's begin. Scary, true, paranormal story number 1, The Smurfs. This true story takes place in Mexico. In the mid-1990s, the Rodriguez family purchased some toys at a garage sale and took them home. Some of these toys were the Smurf family toys. Smurfs are a blue character-like toy that originated in the 1980s. The Smurfs had a lot to do with magic and dabbling of the occult. They were based on a 1980s cartoon series named The Smurfs. They were regarded as just children's harmless play toys. Well, it began one night when the kids would claim that they would hear horrible nightmares and couldn't sleep at night. They would hear walking around in their room and noises coming from their closet where the toys were kept. It wasn't long for things to get much worse. One night, the father went to the restroom and could hear low chattering coming from his kids' room. He went into their bedroom and found the Smurfs in the middle of the bedroom floor, all facing each other in a circle. He then placed them back in the closet where they were kept, with all the other toys. When their mother got up one night, to her surprise, the Smurfs were in the living room by themselves. The father put the Smurfs in the trash can outside after that night. The following morning, the kids claimed that they heard noises coming from their closet. Mr. Rodriguez ran outside and opened the trash can. To the father's horror, the Smurfs' toys were no longer in the trash can. The family then placed all the Smurf toys in a trash bag and into the trash can by the road. Little did they know that this was not the end. At 3 in the morning, the family was awakened by loud sounds coming from outside. When they looked out the window, they claimed that these little blue Smurf toys were throwing rocks at their house and cursing. The front yard was in shambles, and all of their trash was scattered across their front yard. They then began to pray out loud. The assault on their house went on for another 4 hours until the sun came up. At that point, they no longer were anywhere to be found. Scary, true, paranormal story number 2, The Creature Outside Our Door. This is a true story and real experience that happened to me and my family. We are Navajo descent, and I was about 8 years old at the time. We were living with my grandma at her house in Arizona. My mom and dad left to the hospital due to an accident that happened to my mother's brother, my uncle. Me and my little brother were left with my grandma. After midnight, there was a knock on the front door, and I got up out of bed and ran to the living room thinking it was my parents coming back from the hospital. My grandma was sitting in her rocking chair knitting. She then told me to stop and get away from the front door. She asked out loud and yells, "Who is it at the door?" But there was no reply. Then we heard 3 loud knocks on the front door. My grandma yelled out, "Who is it?" again. But again, there was no reply. My grandma yelled, "Get out of here. You are not welcome here. Leave this house." The pounding then started on the door again, and my little brother then woke up from all the noise. Then the knocking stops and is replaced with stomping on the roof. Something was crawling on the roof. Then something heavy hits the porch right outside the window that is covered by a thin white cloth. What we can see through the thin white cloth is a dark figure rise up, but it did not have the form of a man. It looked like a large animal standing on 2 feet. It starts to push on the window, and I for sure thought it was going to break in. Me and my brother then started crying. My grandma then begins praying in Navajo. Then, all of a sudden, everything stopped and everything goes silent. Moments later, lights gloomed through the front window. It was my parents coming back in the car. Years later, my mother told me that this skinwalker had a score to settle with my family, and that night he wanted to take away my little brother, but it did not know how wise and smart my grandmother was in her Navajo ways and the knowledge that she possessed that scary night. Scary, true, paranormal story number 3, The Growl. One night, me and my daughter were in my room and decided to say scary stories, 'cause there was nothing else to do and the thunderstorm took out our electricity. So we decided to say scary stories to pass the time. My other daughter and my wife were in the kitchen trying to find candles. I was telling my daughter the story about a man who was in the hospital and had a dream about a little girl who gave him a baby bear and told him to hold on to it. And when this man wakes up from his dream, his wife then says a little girl came into the room while you were asleep and had placed this bear on top of you. By the way, this is a true story. As I was telling my daughter this true story, we began to feel as if something was watching us. Since this was a true story that I was telling my daughter, I know we must have attracted something, or something was listening, because we both felt as if something else was in the room with us. Me and my daughter were laying on my bed. We were separated by some blankets and a pillow, and the room was pitch dark. As I was finishing the story, I paused for about 10 seconds because I thought I heard something on the ground. It was completely silent. Out of nowhere, we hear someone say, "Growl." It sounded like a little kid was on the ground trying to scare us, and this little kid said growl. After hearing that and knowing that no one else was in the room with us, my daughter began to scream for dear life. The hairs on my arms and on my neck went straight up. I could hear crawling around on the floor as if somebody or something was trying to scare us. Just then, my wife hurried to the room and opened the door and turned the lights on. There was nothing in the room with us. Now, fast forward about a week later, I was in my room alone thinking about that night, and all of a sudden, I feel something crawl onto my bed. Knowing that I was the only one in the room shocked me to the core, and I was petrified. So many things were going through my mind, like who the heck is in my room, and who just laid down next to me. I slowly got up and turned the light on, and out of the corner of my eye, I saw a black shadow laying on my bed. If I learned anything from this, it's that when you say these scary stories, scary things can happen because something could be listening. Thank you for listening to Master of Horror. These were 3 scary, true Wendigo and paranormal stories, number 24. If you like what you've heard, please like and subscribe for more true paranormal stories in the rain. Okay, my friends, till next time, have a spooky night, and don't forget to leave the nightlight on. Hi there, and welcome to Master of Horror, where I post the most scariest true paranormal stories ever told. I give you only the stories that will petrify you. These are 3 true paranormal stories in the rain, number 25. If you like what you hear, please like and subscribe. Thank you again. Now, let's begin. Scary true paranormal story number 1, The Haunted House. In 2012, Tom and Jeanette moved into an older home in New Jersey. As they began to renovate their new home, they found pentagrams outside carved into the trees surrounding their home. They dismissed it, not wanting to make a big deal about it. Then, they began to hear noises coming from different places around the house. One day, when Angela, the youngest daughter, began to clean out their kitchen and fridge, she paused after hearing something. Just then, all of the drawers flew out onto the floor and the cabinets flew open. Angela ran out of the kitchen screaming. Her parents knew something was wrong after this incident. Shortly after, they began to renovate the basement. As they began to tear down the walls, they found an old diary dating back to 1926, when the house was made. The diary at first looked normal, but as they read on, they noticed it had a darker meaning towards it. The book revealed animal sacrifices and occult practices. They were shocked. They wanted to move out at that moment, but they knew they didn't have the financial opportunity to do so. Some weeks later, Angela was on the swing by the borderline of the woods. Jeanette was inside the house. She claims she heard screaming coming from outside. Jeanette hurried outside only to find Angela on the ground crying, claiming that something pushed her off the swing. They went to the hospital and it turned out that Angela had a broken ankle. After returning home from the hospital, Jeanette quickly went to her computer to see the footage of the camera and what occurred to Angela on the swing. Lo and behold, a cloaked figure came out of the woods and pushed Angela off the swing. Jeanette called the police, but after checking the area, the police said they could do nothing at that point and to call them if something else happens. Later on the next day, Jeanette told Angela that she had to run quickly to the pharmacy and she would be right back. Angela agreed. As Angela was on her bed, she heard a noise coming from her closet. The closet doorknob then began shaking. As the closet began to slowly open, Angela quickly went to hide under her bed. She held her mouth with her shaking hand. Coming from out of the closet, Angela saw bare feet walking around the room. She looked and saw the feet of the figure leave the room, and she heard it walking down the stairs. Just then, the entity quickly ran up the stairs and jumped on the bed right above Angela. Angela claimed that at this point she wanted to pass out. Just then, it got quiet. That's when Angela claims the head of a figure popped down from the bed and looked at her with its mouth wide open. It had black eyes with a distorted face. It looked disfigured. She screamed, and the figure that was on her bed leaped off. At that point, she heard her mother's car pull in the driveway. Angela began screaming. Her mother, Jeanette, entered the room and found Angela under the bed shaking and crying. That very day, they got a paranormal team to help cleanse their home. After a few blessings, the house and the cleansing worked, and there was no more paranormal activity to this day. Also, to this very day, they still reside at the same house. Paranormal, true, scary story number 2. They're listening. Story told by Glennis and Solana from Rosenberg, Texas. Hi, this happened in about 2014 when I was at home with my sister. My parents had just left to church and we had nothing to do that night. We were pretty much bored. We had got done playing games on our phones and we even got done coloring earlier that day. It was my sister Solana who had the idea to play something different this time. It was about an hour until my parents would get back home, and we decided to do something that we usually don't do. Solana asked me if whether or not it'd be fun to start talking to ghosts, or whether or not something's actually listening to us. That after playing games, she had felt something was staring at her. You see, sometimes my parents would get things from the side of the road, and in my opinion, some of these things can actually be haunted. Whatever the case is, earlier that day, they did bring some items from the street, like dressers and whatnot. So back to the story. My sister Solana brought up this idea, so we turned off the TV and pretty much all the lights. The only light that was flashing dimly through the living room was the kitchen stove light. Solana looked at the tree and said, "If something is listening to us or something's here, please move the tree just a little bit." We stared at the tree for about 2 to 3 minutes, but after nothing happened, I turned around, but Solana tapped me on my back. When I looked back at the tree, one of the branches was moving. I thought maybe it could be the air conditioner or something different. After staring at it for one more minute, it slowly began to tilt more and more until it actually crashed all the way to the floor. I was thinking to myself, what are the odds of this happening? After the tree had been standing in the same spot for months, why would it just fall to the ground? We both screamed and ran out of the living room as fast as we could and to my parents' bedroom. We shut their door and we locked it, and we jumped on the bed. I pulled the covers up to my face, and so did Solana. The story gets much worse. As we were on the bed literally shaking, we heard something scratching down the hallway, making its way towards the room. It sounded as if it had claw-like fingers. The scratching noise continued all the way down the hallway and stopped exactly at our door. The door was locked, but whatever was on the other side of the door was starting to shake the doorknob. We were terrified. I slowly looked down at the ground under the door and saw a shadow of something standing there. No one was home but me and my sister. Whatever was rattling and shaking the doorknob completely stopped. Just then, at the exact moment, we heard the front door open and heard my parents' voices. We jumped out of the bed and ran out of the room towards the living room. As soon as we saw our parents, we hugged them and told them everything that had just happened. My parents were upset of the fact that we were trying to contact ghosts and the spiritual realm, but in the end, they claimed that they did believe us. Till this very day, I totally stand by my word, and every time I pass that tree in the living room, I get the creeps, and my hair stands completely straight up. True paranormal story number 3, something on the sofa. Personal story. In 1994, when I was about 12 years old, I lived in a townhouse. It was a 2-story house. Basically, my parents would watch movies at night, all the way to about 1 o'clock in the morning with my siblings. They would all go to bed and leave me asleep on the couch. I would always fall asleep on the couch, and most of the time my father would leave me downstairs alone in the pitch black. He turned off all the lights because he did not want to waste electricity. So one night, after everybody went upstairs and left me alone against my will, because I had told them in the past not to leave me alone downstairs, to at least wake me up, they all went upstairs to bed and left me downstairs in the pitch black, all alone. I woke up about 2 o'clock in the morning feeling something staring right at me. It felt as if something was sitting across from me on the sofa. And when I looked across the sofa, all I could see was just pitch black. But I heard somebody or something moving around on the sofa. So I figured it could have probably been my sister also asleep on the sofa. But I then started to hear noises on the sofa across from me. Again, it was pitch dark. I could not see anything. I closed my eyes because I got a feeling of dread. I didn't know exactly what to do at that point. I kept my eyes closed and I acted like I was asleep on the couch. But whatever it was stood up and started to walk right over towards me. I literally can hear it walking on the carpet
Then I heard it kneel down only about a foot away from my face. I could hear grunting and breathing. That's when I just decided to just keep faking my sleep. Whatever it was knew that I was awake and that I was acting like I was sleeping because it didn't stop breathing on me. I literally felt it pull away from me and step back. What felt like hours was only about 5 minutes of it standing in the middle of the living room, looking right at me. I knew it was. I asked myself, who or what would stand in the middle of the living room in the pitch black, making grunting noises? None of my family members would ever have done that. I mustered up the courage, and I counted to 5 in my head, just to jump up and run up the stairs in the pitch black, hoping to God that I wouldn't trip. So now I began counting down from 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I quickly jumped up and started running in the pitch dark towards the stairs. I even put my hand on the wall trying to feel for the light switch to turn it on, but again, I always had problems turning the light on and trying to find where it exactly was. When I made it halfway up the stairs actually curved and go back around another flight of stairs. When I was halfway up the stairs, I could hear something right behind me holding onto the rail and breathing heavily. I went up the stairs and made it to my parents' door. I tried to unlock it quickly because they always kept their door locked, but I couldn't. That's when I went to my room and opened the door. I quickly turned the lights on, and I turned around and looked towards the direction of the stairs, and I saw a shadow duck down from the view of the stairs, hiding under the stairrail. I woke up my sister, then my mother, and then my father. My dad went downstairs, and nothing was down there. He questioned me over and over what had occurred and told me that it was my imagination. I know for a fact that what I heard and what I felt was 100% true. Thank you for listening to Master of Horror. If you like what you've heard, please like and subscribe. Well, okay, my friends, good night. And remember to leave the nightlight on.
Hello there, and welcome to Master of Horror, a series of true scary, ghost, wendigo, and cryptid stories that I've gathered from all across the internet and what I have heard throughout the years. These videos have rain in the background so as to help you relax and sleep. I hope you enjoy true paranormal wendigo and cryptids stories. Okay, now let's begin. Paranormal story number 1. My best friend became a wendigo. In this true story, some names have been changed. My friend Roger, after not hearing from him for about 2 years, came to me and asked me to help go with him to a cabin in the woods about 2 hours from where I lived, so he could show me and tell me something that was very important. I went ahead and got into his car, and we headed to his cabin. This was a huge surprise to me, for I hadn't heard from him in 2 years. While in the car, he did not look the same as I remembered him. I asked him how he was doing, but he didn't answer that. He said, "Ben, I know it's been a long time. I was hoping you would have answered me like you did, and I thank you for that." The whole ride over there to the cabin felt really awkward, and I knew that he must have been in some kind of trouble, so I asked him, "Roger, is everything okay? Are you in any kind of trouble?" Roger looked at me with a straight face as sweat began to come down his forehead. He said, "I need your help with something, Ben. I really do. You're the only one I could trust at this point." I looked at Roger in the eyes and I told him, "Is Samantha okay?" Roger didn't answer me. It was quiet pretty much the whole way to the cabin. I actually looked over at him while he was driving, but no matter how much I tried, not look like my best friend Roger. There was just something about his face. He then parked in front of a cabin and said, "We're here." So I got off and waited for him to open the cabin front door. He went in and waited for me to come in behind him, and then he locked the cabin front door and he sat down in front of a fireplace that was already lit. There were 2 chairs in the room in front of this fireplace, one for him and one for me. Roger then said, "Let me finish talking first, and I promise you that anything that you want to ask I will answer. Just please sit down across from me and listen to everything I have to say. I will make it quick." So I've known Roger my whole life. I knew there was something very serious going on. So as a friend, the best thing that I could do is just listen to what he had to say. So I sat down across from him and said, "Go ahead and speak." Roger said, "When I moved to Canada with Samantha, my fiancée, 2 years ago, everything was perfect. We had the perfect idea of a family and of our future together. A year into living with her in Canada, she started talking to some old friends that she had in school and would come home late at night. I didn't see this as a problem because I've always trusted Samantha. She began to act weird. She started dressing in all black, and there were times where she didn't even look like herself. The first thing that popped up in my mind is I suspected that she was cheating on me, or maybe there was someone else she was talking to, but that was far from the truth. Sometimes she came home really late, and I would ask her, why is she coming home so late? And she said, it's okay, don't worry. I'm not messing around behind her back. There was something I really had to do after work that was very important. This went on for a couple of months, until it got so bad that she would not show back up at home days at a time. I started to notice that her skin would look more pale, but yet she would look more younger. She looked vibrant and her eyes had a sort of a glow to it. She looked so young, way younger than she really is. There were times I could not even keep up with her. But everything changed one night. She had said that she wanted to play a game, so she tied me up to a chair and put handcuffs on me, on both of my wrists, tightly. I thought she was going to do something kind of naughty, something that we've never done before. But I've always trusted her, so I went along with everything she did. She said, I'm going to call a friend over. But I didn't understand why she would want to call one of her friends. But by the time I knew, somebody had came to the front door, and it was quiet for a while. I wanted to get up to see what was going on. I couldn't do anything. She even put duct tape around my mouth, so I couldn't scream. I didn't understand what was going on. When I heard screaming come from outside the bedroom door, my eyes widened with fear. The door opened to my room where I was, and Samantha started pulling in her so-called friend by the legs. He was unconscious, and I've never seen this guy before. I didn't know if she was joking around, but when she grabbed a hammer and bashed his head in, I knew this was for real. She began eating the flesh off of him. I started screaming, even though I had tape around my mouth. She looked at me and smiled and said, "This is what I've been hiding from you for the past year. I am a flesh eater, and that's why I am so vibrant and alive, and I want you to become like me." She grabbed the knife and hacked off his arm and put it to my mouth and said, "Bite and eat." With the same knife that she used to take his arm off, she put it to my throat, and I said, "Please, don't kill me." I was starting to beg her. I had no choice. I decided to trust in her, even though I knew at that point that she was a I had no choice but to bite the arm, and so I ate as she said. The flesh tasted awful at first, but as soon as I was done having a few bites, something changed inside of me. For some weird reason, I began to want more. She started laughing, and she saw that I started eating more and more without her pushing me to do it. Hearing my friend Roger telling me all of this stuff made me sick. I said, "Roger, are you okay? Are you sure you're telling me the truth?" Roger got very angry, and he screamed like I've never heard him scream before, and said, "Just listen to me. I would never lie to you. Please listen to me." I leaned back in my chair. Roger said, "Ben, I'm almost done. Please, just listen." So Roger continued to say that the weeks went on, and he began to have a taste for human flesh. He said me and Samantha went on crazy eating binges, eating sprees where we would kill and eat humans. It started with maybe one person a week to where it became almost an everyday thing. Roger looked at me with tears in his eyes and said, "Ben, please believe me. I've been consuming flesh every day for months, but have gotten to the point to where now I cannot live like this." I asked Roger, "Roger, where is Samantha? What happened to her?" Roger then said, "You see, about 2 weeks ago, Samantha started to change. I woke up one night and her body became that of a creature, and she had eyes that were no longer green but turned red. I even found her one night drooling as if she wanted to eat me. When we were outside one night, she went up to me crying, telling me that she did not want to live like this no more. So I started crying because I missed the Samantha that I used to know, the Samantha that didn't eat humans, the Samantha that had a beautiful heart. You see, Ben, the people that she was hanging around with must have been also Wendigos, a creature that eats off the human flesh and survives. All I remember is grabbing the gun, and while her back was turned towards me, I shot her in the back of the head. When I did, I kid you not, her body became that of a creature. Her true self came out, and her skin became slimy. Claws were formed in front of my face. As she lay dead, I had no choice but to bury my very own Samantha. So you see, Ben, I came to you to ask you a favor. You see, I cannot kill myself. It will be too hard. In order to break the curse, someone has to kill me. I came to ask you to please help me in my life. If you do this, the curse will be broken, and I will no longer have a hunger for flesh As Roger was telling me this, I noticed his eyes were turning red. I noticed that his hands were gripping his pants tighter and tighter. At this point, Roger said something that I'll never, ever forget. What he said chilled me to the core. Roger then said, "Ben, even now, I am fighting it with all I can, the urge to want to get out of this chair and eat you alive. You see, Ben, you're my best friend, but even you have the possibility of being eaten alive at this very moment, for my hunger for human flesh is too great at this moment. I ate flesh, human flesh, just hours before coming here. You see, Ben, on the way to the cabin to get ready and set the fire going, planning everything that I was going to tell you, I passed by a rest stop, and there was a family which consisted of a husband, a wife, and 2 kids. They were in their car, and I spotted them. I was watching them as they got out and walked into the rest stop. Not only did I eat and devour all of them, but in the back of my car, there are body parts." He said, "Ben, if you want proof, just look in the back seat of my car." So I got up, I walked outside, and I peeked into the back seat of his car, which he had a cloth covering something. So I opened his door, and I picked up the cloth, and there were 4 heads, 4 human heads. I quickly covered the heads back with the cloth, and I threw up on the floor. I ran back inside and sat down. Roger looked at me in the eyes and said, "You see, I'm telling you the truth. I'm not lying to you. I am a monster, and I asked you to please, before I hurt anyone else, kill me, Ben. Just kill me. Look, right there. I have a loaded shotgun. Please blow my brains out so I do not hurt anyone else." I was really scared because for the first time I was going to kill someone, but not just anyone. It was my best friend I was going to murder. My best friend Roger. The Roger that I've known since we were kids, since the 2nd grade. Roger continued to speak and said, "When you're done killing me, I have in the glove compartment $50,000 that I saved up that I will give to you that you can have. That is my life savings right now. That is what me and Samantha accumulated throughout the years. In the back of my car, I also have gasoline and matches. I want you to torch the cabin. Torch it to the ground." I looked at Roger and I told him, "Okay, I will do it. I will do it for you. That's the least I can do." I quickly looked at Roger's eyes and I saw hope in his eyes. He smiled. He smiled, and for the first time I saw him smile, and I knew that he was going to be at peace. He knew he was going to be in a way better place. I got up off my chair and I grabbed the shotgun and I walked up to Roger. My hands began to shake. I've never ever killed anything in my entire life, let alone a human being. Roger looked up at me and said, yes, Ben, please." Just then he stops me and says, "Wait, Ben, thank you. Thank you for doing this. And I love you." I closed my eyes and I started to pull the trigger back until I felt an explosion coming from the shotgun. The vibration alone shocked my whole body, starting from my arms to my head. The shotgun blast was so powerful that it jerked me back. All I remember is my own face got covered in warm liquid. It was blood. I quickly ran to the kitchen and rinsed my face off, not wanting any of the Wendigo blood in my mouth It touched my eyes. It ran down my face. I didn't want this on me. I quickly was trying to clean myself off. I think this was traumatizing. I walked to the chair of where he was sitting, and he had no head. I went to the back of the car, and I quickly took the gasoline out, and I torched the cabin. I watched from the outside the cabin going up in flames. The whole cabin, with my best friend Roger, and any memories that he's ever had were up in flames. But just then, while the cabin was in flames, I forgot that he had the key in his pocket to the car, and I was going to be stuck there in the woods. But it was way too late. The flames were too big at that point, and smoke filled the cabin. I had no choice but to leave the key in his pocket. I ran to the back of the car and I grabbed a backpack that he had, and I went to the glove compartment and I pulled out the $50,000 in cash. I also grabbed the handgun that he had in his car. I hurried up and I put gasoline on the car, and I also lit that on fire. I ran towards the dirt road on the main path out of there. As I was walking, many thoughts were going through my mind. I was able to hitchhike my way back to where I lived. I rented a motel for a couple of days, not wanting to go to my house. And here I am writing this down on the desk in the motel room, that everything that I have written down and that has happened is true. That there are such things as Wendigos and the paranormal, and these things do exist. I don't know if I'll have nightmares. I hope I don't. But most of all, to Roger, I hope you're in a better place, my friend. Goodbye. Me and my uncle are Mexican and Native American, and this happened in the Mojave Desert in South California. He was driving around with his girlfriend late at night, and they saw something that looked like a huge black dog on the side of the road. He slowed down, and the dog then began crossing the road. Instead of walking like a normal dog, this thing moved like a toy rocking horse. He said it stopped in the middle of the road and stared at them, and its eyes had a red glow. My uncle is the most coolest badass person in the world. He didn't even get scared. Nothing scares him. A man from the reservation has just delivered a bull to a buyer's ranch out far in the reservation. He starts getting lost, and in a couple of hours it gets late. It's a lot of land, and what maps are available aren't always available. Anyways, it's late and getting dark by the time he gets on the main road towards home. Just as he gets to the intersection where there's no stop sign, he sees up ahead, right in the middle of the road, a lone coyote is just standing there. So before he starts driving, he leans on the horn, and in response, he watches as the coyote raises up on its back legs. It resumes the form of a man. Only his legs and feet, arms and hands seem more canine than human, and it starts walking towards the opposite shoulder. The man, not believing what he's seeing, closes his eyes and shakes his head. When again he looks, there's a coyote sitting off to the side of the road and looking back at him, as if it's waiting on him to drive by. The man is certain that it's the lights playing tricks on him, and the fact that he has been on a long drive must be draining him. However, as he passes that coyote, he gives it a quick look and he sees that this coyote is grinning at him. Having heard stories of skinwalkers, the man blesses himself and he fixes his eyes on the road.